Madison Carter was not supposed to survive that fall. That's what the headlines said the next morning. That's what the witnesses believed. That's what her fiancé wanted. But before the world called it suicide, before the media twisted it into scandal, before the Parkhurst name protected itself, there was a moment. A single moment on the 47th floor of a Manhattan penthouse where everything shifted. And it began with applause. The ballroom glittered under cascading crystal chandeliers. Floor-to-ceiling glass walls revealed the New York skyline glowing like a crown beneath them. Politicians, hedge fund managers, old-money socialites, everyone who mattered, stood inside that penthouse celebrating what they believed was a power alliance. Madison Carter and Adrian Parkhurst. Love. Legacy. Influence. Madison stood near the center of the room in a silk ivory gown that caught the light every time she moved. Her posture was calm, elegant. She wasn't loud. She never needed to be. Adrian stood beside her, tailored tuxedo perfectly fitted, one hand resting lightly at her back. The Parkhurst Foundation logo shimmered across a massive lead wall behind them. Victoria Parkhurst, Adrian's mother, took the microphone first. Her voice was warm, controlled, polished. "Tonight," she said with a smile, "we celebrate family, resilience, and the merging of two extraordinary futures." Applause filled the room. Madison felt a flicker of nerves, normal nerves. The kind that come with stepping into a legacy family. But she told herself it was just adjustment. Just transition. She didn't know she was standing at the edge of something far darker. The lights dimmed suddenly. At first, Madison assumed it was part of the program. The lead wall flickered. Then a video began playing. A grainy clip. Madison's face. A man's voice. A bedroom setting. Laughter. The room went silent. Her heart stopped. It looked real. It looked intimate. It looked devastating. But it wasn't real. The footage was manipulated. Spliced. Designed to imply betrayal. A whisper spread like wildfire through the ballroom. She cheated. Is that recent? Adrian, does he know? Phones lifted immediately. Guests began recording. Madison turned toward Adrian. He wasn't confused. He wasn't shocked. He was watching the screen with an expression that chilled her. Detached. Calculated. Her stomach dropped. "Adrian," she whispered. He didn't answer. Victoria stepped back from the microphone. No denial. No defense. The video continued just long enough to stain her name. Then it stopped. The lights returned. The damage was done. Madison opened her mouth to speak, to explain, to demand answers. And someone shoved her. Hard. She didn't see who. She didn't hear who. She only felt the force against her back. The railing disappeared beneath her hands. And then, nothing. For a fraction of a second, the world was silent. Then gravity took her. The Manhattan skyline spun violently around her as she fell. Wind ripped the air from her lungs. The glass walls shrank above her. 47 floors. She didn't even have time to scream. And then, impact. But not on pavement. A lower architectural awning, reinforced canvas and steel, tore beneath her body, ripping under the force but breaking her fall just enough. The sound echoed through the street below. People screamed. Security rushed forward. But the angle of the awning had concealed her from immediate view. In the chaos, in the panic, no one saw that she was still breathing. Her body was broken. Ribs cracked. Shoulder dislocated. Blood pooling beneath her. But her heart was still beating. Weakly. Fighting. Upstairs, in the penthouse, the narrative was already forming. She jumped. She couldn't handle the humiliation. Victoria Parkhurst's voice carried through the room with devastating calm. "This is a tragic mental health situation. Please respect our family's privacy." Adrian said nothing. He didn't run to the balcony. He didn't scream her name. He stood still, watching, as if confirming completion. 20 minutes later, news alerts began hitting phones across Manhattan. Breaking: socialite Madison Carter jumps from fiancé's penthouse after scandal video leak. The footage from inside the ballroom went viral before midnight. The story was clean. Elegant woman exposed. Overwhelmed. Jumped. Case closed. But in a dark town car parked 3 blocks away, someone else was watching the news unfold with narrowed eyes. Ethan Russo. He wasn't supposed to be connected to this night. He hadn't attended the engagement party. But he had met Madison Carter once, 6 weeks earlier, during a private security consultation involving foundation funding routes. She had looked him in the eye when she spoke. No fear. No trembling. No manipulation. She wasn't fragile. She wasn't unstable. And she definitely wasn't suicidal. Ethan muted the news broadcast. She didn't jump, he said quietly. Marco Alvarez, seated in the driver's seat, glanced at him in the rearview mirror. You're sure? Ethan's jaw tightened. The timing is surgical. The humiliation. The media presence. The speed of the narrative. He leaned forward slightly. Go back. When Marco arrived near the building, emergency responders were already blocking off the street. Police tape stretched across the perimeter. Paramedics scanned the area beneath the balcony. But something didn't sit right. Marco noticed the torn awning structure, partially collapsed, partially folded inward. He stepped closer. A faint movement. A hand. Blood-soaked silk fabric shifting slightly. His pulse spiked. She's alive, he muttered into his concealed MEC. Up in the car, Ethan went still. Extract her, he ordered immediately. No hospitals. No public report corrections. Move now. The extraction was silent. Precise. Within minutes, Madison Carter disappeared from the scene. The official responders would later declare they could not locate her body after impact, assuming she had fallen beyond the perimeter. The narrative shifted slightly. Body not yet recovered. But the damage was already done. Social media had convicted her. The Pockhorst name remained untouched. Madison drifted in and out of consciousness during transport. She felt cold. Weightless. Pain like lightning under her skin. When she finally woke fully, it wasn't in a hospital. It was in a quiet room with dim lighting, linen curtains, and the distant sound of wind moving through trees. Upstate New York. Private estate. Private medical team. No reporters. No police. No Pockhorst lawyers. Only controlled silence. And at the foot of the bed, standing with unreadable calm, was Ethan Russo. She tried to speak. Nothing came out. He stepped closer. You fell, he said evenly. But you didn't jump. Her eyes filled slowly. That was the first time someone said it out loud. She didn't jump. And in that moment, still broken, still bleeding, Madison Carter realized something far more terrifying than the fall itself. This wasn't humiliation. This wasn't scandal. This was planned. And whoever planned it believed she was dead. Which meant they weren't finished protecting themselves yet. And neither was she. Madison Carter was declared missing by morning. By afternoon, the media corrected itself. By evening, they had settled on a conclusion. Presumed dead. No body recovered. High-impact fall. Public humiliation. Emotional instability. The story was neat. Symmetrical. Convenient. And convenience, Ethan Russo knew, was never accidental. Upstate New York was quiet in late autumn. The estate sat behind iron gates and a mile-long private drive lined with skeletal trees. No reporters. No drones. No curious neighbors. Inside, Madison lay motionless beneath layered blankets, her arm immobilized, ribs wrapped, Feline feeding carefully controlled fluids into her bloodstream. She had survived the fall. Barely. 3 fractured ribs. A dislocated shoulder. Internal bruising. A mild spinal compression that would take months to heal. The doctors had called it statistically impossible. Ethan called it interruption. He stood near the window, hands in his coat pockets, watching the wind shift the tree branches outside. Marco stepped in quietly. She's stable, he said. Doctors say the first 48 hours were the critical window. She made it through. Ethan nodded once. And the city? Pockhorst lawyers already circulating statements. Mental health narrative. Tragic breakdown under pressure. Ethan's jaw tightened. Of course they were. The powerful never leave space for doubt. They fill it immediately. Begin pulling financials, Ethan said calmly. All Parkhurst Foundation transfers in the last 6 months. Private security contracts. Event vendor payments. Marco hesitated slightly. You think it goes that deep? Ethan turned from the window. I think humiliation doesn't require choreography. Murder does. Madison woke fully 3 days later. Pain arrived before clarity. Her throat burned. Her chest ached with every breath. Her shoulder felt like fire under skin. She blinked against soft lighting and unfamiliar walls. Not a hospital. No beeping machines. No antiseptic smell. Just quiet. She tried to sit up. Pain shot through her side. Don't. The voice came from the doorway. Ethan stepped inside slowly, controlled as always. She recognized him instantly. You, her voice cracked. Yes. Memory flooded back. The video. The balcony. The shove. Her breathing quickened. I didn't. I know, he said evenly. Her eyes filled. He didn't offer comfort. He didn't step forward dramatically. He simply stood there, grounded, steady, like a fixed point in chaos. Where am I? She whispered. Safe. Her eyes searched his face. Why? It was the simplest question. And the heaviest. Ethan paused. Because you were not supposed to survive. Silence stretched between them. Understanding settled slowly. They thought I was dead. Yes. And you? I don't believe in convenient tragedies. Meanwhile, in Manhattan, the Parkhurst residence was operating like a war room. Victoria Parkhurst sat at the head of her dining table, laptop open, PR advisors connected via video conference. Stick to the emotional fragility angle, she instructed. Do not entertain conspiracy speculation. Adrian must remain visibly devastated. Across from her, Adrian sat motionless. He hadn't slept much. But not from grief. From calculation. Insurance paperwork. Victoria asked without looking at him. Already filed, Adrian replied quietly. Good. We cannot allow the foundation to suffer instability. This was unfortunate, but survivable. Unfortunate. That was what they called it. Not murder. Not betrayal. Unfortunate. Back at the estate, Madison struggled with movement, with breathing, with memory. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt the push again. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't slipping. It was force. Strong. Intentional. Someone wanted her over that railing. Who was behind me? She asked one afternoon, voice steadier now. Ethan sat across from her, tablet resting on his knee. We're reviewing footage, he said. There were cameras. Yes. Her brows tightened. Then why hasn't anything surfaced? Ethan held her gaze. Because powerful families edit narratives faster than evidence can breathe. That answer terrified her more than the fall. The first break came 5 days later. Marco entered Ethan's private office with a thin file. Payment transfer, he said. Shell Corporation. Routed through 3 intermediaries. Final recipient, Liam Graves. Ethan didn't recognize the name. Background. Former private security. Discharged for excessive force. Now freelance. Connection to Parkhurst. Indirect. But. Marco flipped another page. $17,000 transferred 48 hours before the engagement. Ethan leaned back slightly. That's not humiliation money. No. That's operational. Madison began physical therapy earlier than recommended. She refused to remain in bed. Every step hurt. Every breath reminded her she had nearly died. But pain meant she was alive. And being alive meant something had gone wrong for someone else. That thought steadied her. One evening, Ethan entered the sitting room where she was practicing slow steps. There's something you need to see, he said. He handed her a tablet. Bank transfer. Liam Graves. Her stomach dropped. I don't know that name. You don't need to. She swallowed. What does it mean? It means someone paid for your fall. Her hand trembled slightly. Who? Not confirmed yet. But Ethan already suspected. Because humiliation had been public. The shove had been hidden. 2 separate operations. One visible. One lethal. And visible distractions are often masks. Another break followed. Phone records. Marco laid them out on Ethan's desk in silence. Adrian Pockhorst. Outgoing call. 18 seconds. Recipient, Liam Graves. Timestamp, 1 minute before Madison went over the railing. The room went very quiet. Confirm location triangulation, Ethan ordered. Already did, Marco replied. Adrian was on the balcony. There it was. Not emotional chaos. Not shock. Coordination. When Madison saw the call record, something inside her went still. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She stared. 1 minute, she whispered. Yes. And he called the man who pushed me. Yes. She nodded slowly. The betrayal didn't explode. It hollowed. Why? She asked softly. Ethan didn't answer immediately. Because motive required the final piece. And that piece arrived the next morning. Insurance documentation. Filed 8 weeks before the engagement. Multimillion-dollar life insurance policy. Beneficiary, Adrian Pockhorst. Clause, double payout for accidental death. Ethan closed the file. There it was. Intent. Premeditation. Profit. Madison read every page. Every signature. Every clause. 8 weeks. He had planned her death while kissing her goodnight. While discussing wedding venues. While telling her he loved her. Her breathing remained controlled. But her eyes changed. Grief shifted into something sharper. They wanted me humiliated first, she said quietly. Yes. So that when I died, it made sense. Yes. She looked up at Ethan. They didn't expect me to survive. No. Silence. Then she asked the question that shifted everything. What happens now? Ethan studied her carefully. Most people in her position would want protection. Or disappearance. Or revenge in the dark. Instead, her voice was steady. What do you want? He asked. She didn't answer immediately. She walked slowly to the window, wincing slightly at the pull in her ribs. The estate grounds stretched out quietly beneath fading sunlight. They took my name, she said softly. They wrote my ending. She turned back toward him. I want it back. Not vengeance. Restoration. Narrative control. Ethan nodded once. Then we do it publicly. Her pulse quickened. How? Where it hurts the most. Understanding dawned slowly. The gala, she whispered. The Pockhorst Foundation annual benefit. 3 months away. Televised. Live-streamed. Donor-heavy. Victoria's pride event. Ethan watched the shift in her expression. Fear still existed. But beneath it. Steel. They believe you're dead, he said evenly. Madison inhaled carefully. Good. For the first time since the fall, she didn't look broken. She looked strategic. And somewhere in Manhattan, Victoria Pockhorst began planning her next season of public dominance. Unaware that the woman she tried to erase was already planning her return. 3 months. That was how long the world believed Madison Carter had been dead. 3 months since the headlines declared her unstable. 3 months since the Pockhorst Foundation released carefully worded statements about grief and privacy. 3 months since Adrian Pockhorst stood before cameras with a lowered gaze and rehearsed sorrow. And 3 months since a fall from the 47th floor failed to finish what had been meticulously arranged. Upstate, winter had begun to press against the estate windows. Inside, Madison Carter was learning how to walk without wincing. The physical therapy had been brutal. Her ribs had healed slowly. Her shoulder regained movement inch by inch. There were nights she woke gasping from dreams of falling, her body remembering what her mind tried to suppress. But pain sharpened her focus. She wasn't rebuilding to survive. She was rebuilding to return. In Manhattan, preparations for the Pockhorst Foundation annual benefit were already underway. It was Victoria Pockhorst's crown jewel event. An evening of legacy speeches. Scholarship announcements. Billion-dollar donors. A live-stream audience in the hundreds of thousands. It was the one night each year when the Pockhorst name stood unchallenged at the center of influence. Victoria had no intention of allowing scandal to stain it. The narrative has stabilized, one PR consultant assured her during a planning session. Victoria nodded, reviewing donor confirmations. Ensure the tribute segment includes Adrian, she said. Resilience. Personal loss. Forward strength. Across the table, Adrian remained composed. But beneath that composure, something restless moved. The insurance claim had processed smoothly. Too smoothly. Money wired quietly into accounts that were now under careful layering. He told himself it was necessary. That Madison had become inconvenient. That the humiliation had been unavoidable. He did not allow himself to think about the balcony. About the timing of the call. About the push. Because thinking required conscience. And conscience required regret. Upstate, Ethan Russo sat across from Madison in a quiet study lined with dark wood shelves. On the desk between them were folders. Call logs. Insurance documents. Wire transfers. Actor contracts tied to the fake video production. Everything authenticated. Time-stamped. Verified. You understand, Ethan said evenly. Once this goes public, there is no retreat. Madison's hands rested calmly in her lap. I don't want retreat. He studied her carefully. You could disappear, he added. Start over. New name. No noise. Her lips curved faintly. They already erased me once. She lifted her gaze to his. I won't give them the ending they wrote. Silence lingered between them. Ethan respected resolve. But he also understood risk. You will be seen, he said. Exposed to public reaction. Media scrutiny. Legal retaliation. Madison nodded. I was already exposed. This time, I choose the exposure. That was the difference. Choice. The plan formed methodically. It would not be loud. It would not be chaotic. It would be precise. Step 1. Confirm every document through independent third-party verification to prevent immediate legal dismissal. Step 2. Secure control of the gala's audiovisual system through a silent override. Step 3. Time her appearance at the emotional peak of Victoria's speech. Maximum visibility, maximum psychological impact. No violence, Madison insisted early in planning. Ethan's brow lifted slightly. You're certain? Yes. She wasn't interested in blood. She was interested in collapse. And collapse, in powerful circles, happened through reputation. Physical training became part of preparation. Not combat, presence. Madison practiced standing still under pressure. Practiced breathing evenly while imagining hundreds of eyes fixed on her. Practiced speaking clearly without letting anger distort her voice. The first time she tried delivering the opening line, her voice shook. The second time, less. By the 10th time, her tone was calm enough to silence a room. Ethan observed without interference. There was something transformative about watching someone who had nearly died choose confrontation over fear. You don't hate them, he asked her once, during a late-night strategy session. She paused before answering. I did, she admitted quietly. For weeks. It consumed me. And now? Now I want truth more than I want revenge. That answer changed something in the room. Meanwhile, Marco's investigation deepened. The actor who filmed the manipulated video had already fled the state. But contracts remained. Digital footprints remained. And Liam Graves, the man who had pushed her, had grown careless. Large purchase. Offshore travel inquiries. Sudden debt clearance. Pressure revealed patterns. Victoria had routed payments through 3 shell corporations tied indirectly to foundation vendors. Subtle. Layered. But traceable. Marco laid everything out one evening in the study. It's airtight, he said. Ethan nodded. And Adrian? Life insurance confirmed. Double payout clause active for accidental death. Filed 8 weeks prior. Madison stood silently near the window as they spoke. The betrayal no longer stung like a wound. It felt clinical now. Strategic. That was somehow worse. 3 weeks before the gala, Madison visited a mirror for a long time. The woman staring back at her wasn't the same woman who stood at the engagement party. There were faint scars. A new stillness in her eyes. Strength that hadn't existed before. They wanted you small, she whispered to her reflection. She adjusted her posture. I'll give them unforgettable. In Manhattan, Victoria finalized the gala program. Donor seating charts. Security layouts. Livestream broadcasting partners. She had already replaced Madison's name in Foundation archives with a scholarship fund tribute. Carter Memorial Award. How poetic, she had thought. To profit publicly from private elimination. Adrian reviewed the final draft of his speech. He had perfected the look of restrained grief. It almost felt real now. Almost. But sometimes, in the quiet of his penthouse at night, he thought he heard wind through broken fabric. And for a split second, doubt would surface. Then he'd push it down. Because doubt required acknowledging possibility. And possibility required admitting she might not be gone. 2 days before the gala, Madison stood in the study one last time with Ethan. "You understand," he said quietly, "they will attempt counterattack. I expect it. They may call it manipulation. I have documentation. They may call you unstable." She held his gaze. "Then they'll have to explain why unstable people take out life insurance policies." A flicker of approval crossed his expression. She wasn't reacting anymore. She was anticipating. The night before departure, Madison didn't sleep much. Not from fear. From awareness. Tomorrow, she would walk into the same society that watched her fall. The same room that whispered as she was humiliated. The same family that calculated her death. But this time, she would enter on her own terms. Alive. Prepared. Documented. She stood near the estate window as snow began to fall lightly across the grounds. Ethan stepped beside her. "Once we begin," he said, "there's no silence afterward." She nodded slowly. "I don't want silence." He looked at her carefully. "Why not?" She exhaled. "Because silence is what allowed them to write my story." Snow gathered across the trees. Tomorrow, Manhattan would glitter under chandeliers again. Victoria would stand at her podium. Adrian would perform sorrow. The donors would applaud. And at the precise moment the narrative felt safest, the doors would open. And the dead woman would walk in. The Parkhurst Foundation annual benefit had never failed. For 15 years, it had been the crown jewel of Manhattan's philanthropic calendar. A room where money moved quietly, influence solidified publicly, and reputations were polished under crystal chandeliers. Tonight was no different. Or so they believed. The ballroom shimmered in gold and white. Live cameras streamed the event to donors across the country. Journalists stood along the perimeter. Politicians filled the front tables. The Parkhurst name glowed across a towering lead backdrop behind the stage. Victoria Parkhurst stood at the podium in a tailored midnight blue gown, her posture regal, her smile effortless. "Resilience," she began smoothly, her voice carrying across the room, "is the foundation of legacy." Applause followed. Adrian stood slightly behind her, head bowed just enough to suggest humility. The perfect image of a man who had endured tragedy and emerged dignified. 3 months earlier, this room had whispered about scandal. Tonight, it applauded survival. Victoria continued. "This year has tested our family deeply. Loss reshapes us. It teaches us what endures." She paused, letting emotion hover carefully in the air. "And though we mourn Madison Carter, we honor her memory through our continued commitment to excellence." More applause. Cameras zoomed in. The Carter Memorial Scholarship banner flickered briefly on the screen behind her. And then, the ballroom doors opened. Not dramatically. Not violently. Simply opened. A few heads turned first. Then more. Then the applause began to fracture. Madison Carter stepped inside. Alive. The room did not gasp all at once. It froze. Sound collapsed inward. She wore black, simple, structured, deliberate. Not mourning. Not bridal. Not fragile. Her posture was steady. Her steps measured. Each heel strike echoed across marble flooring that had once carried her fall into rumor. Victoria's hand tightened slightly around the podium. Adrian's face drained of color. Phones began to lift again, but this time, not for scandal. For disbelief. Madison walked forward until she stood clearly visible beneath the chandeliers. She did not rush. She did not look down. She looked directly at the stage. At Victoria. At Adrian. And when she spoke, her voice carried without trembling. "I didn't jump." 3 words. Simple. Immovable. The room shifted. Victoria attempted composure. "This is inappropriate." The LED screen behind her flickered. Not with tribute graphics. With documents. Call logs. Insurance contracts. Bank transfers. The gala's audio-visual system had already been overridden. Time-stamped. Authenticated. Verified. The screen zoomed in on a phone record. Adrian Parkhurst. Outgoing call. Recipient, Liam Graves. Duration, 18 seconds. Time, 1 minute before Madison Carter fell from the balcony. A murmur rippled through the ballroom. Victoria turned sharply toward the screen. This is fabricated. Another document replaced it. Life insurance policy. Filed 8 weeks prior to the engagement. Beneficiary, Adrian Pockhorst. Clause highlighted in red. Double payout in case of accidental death. The murmuring grew louder. Camera operators zoomed in instinctively. Journalists began typing furiously. Madison stepped forward another pace. You wanted it to look emotional, she said evenly. You wanted humiliation to explain my death. Silence fell heavier now. The next image appeared. Wire transfers. Shell corporations. Payment to Liam Graves, the man who had pushed her. 3 separate routed transactions traced back to a foundation vendor controlled by Victoria Pockhorst. Victoria's composure cracked. This is defamation. Security. But security did not move. Because donors were no longer seated calmly. They were whispering. Calculating. Distancing. Reputation in elite rooms shifts faster than loyalty. Adrian finally spoke, voice tight. You don't understand what you're seeing. Madison turned her gaze to him. I understand that you called the man who pushed me. 1 minute before it happened. The words were not loud. They didn't need to be. Adrian's mouth opened slightly. No defense came. Because the documents behind him did not blink. They did not stutter. They did not lie. Victoria attempted recovery. This is emotional manipulation. A woman clearly unstable. Madison didn't flinch. Unstable people don't structure multimillion-dollar policies with double accidental payout clauses. A few donors shifted visibly. One board member quietly stepped away from the front table. Victoria felt it, the subtle retreat of support. And she understood something in that moment. This was not scandal. This was exposure. Every layer she had carefully constructed was unraveling in real time. The livestream numbers climbed rapidly. Social media exploded. The dead woman had returned. With receipts. Madison turned slowly to face the audience. You believed I jumped, she said calmly. Because you were shown a story that made it convenient. Her eyes moved across the room. But convenience is not truth. No shouting. No chaos. Just clarity. The final document appeared on the screen. A signed contract between a hired actor and a Pockhorst intermediary for the production of the fake video. Silence consumed the ballroom entirely now. Victoria stepped back from the podium. Adrian's composure fractured fully. Turn it off, he whispered to no one in particular. But no one obeyed. Because obedience had shifted. Donors were already making quiet exit decisions. Phones were ringing across the perimeter. Legal counsel messages flooding in. Madison did not smile. Victory was not joy. It was restoration. She stepped back slightly. And for the first time, Ethan Russo became visible near the rear of the room. He did not stand beside her on stage. He did not interfere. He simply stood, watching. Protective, but not possessive. Victoria looked at him briefly and understood something else. This had not been chaos. It had been precision. The narrative had not collapsed accidentally. It had been dismantled. Madison's gaze returned to Adrian one last time. You didn't expect me to survive. He could not answer. Because the answer was written across his face. No. He hadn't. Madison took one steady breath. Then she stepped away from the center of the ballroom. Not escorted. Not chased. She simply walked. And as she reached the doors again, the applause did not return. Instead, silence followed her, heavy and undeniable. Behind her, the Pockhorst empire began to fracture. Board members resigning. Donors withdrawing. Media headlines rewriting themselves. Not socialite jumps after scandal. But philanthropic family accused of attempted murder and insurance fraud. Victoria remained standing at the podium, frozen in the wreckage of her own orchestration. Adrian sank slowly into a chair. The empire did not fall with violence. It collapsed under evidence. Outside, Manhattan glittered beneath the night sky, the same city that had watched her fall 3 months earlier. Madison stepped into the cold air. For a brief moment, she closed her eyes. Not from exhaustion. From completion. Ethan approached quietly. You're aware, he said evenly, this will not end tonight. She nodded. I know. Legal battles. Public scrutiny. Investigations. Consequences. But the most important thing had already happened. They can't write it anymore, she said softly. Ethan looked at her. No, he agreed. They can't. She turned toward the city lights. 3 months ago, she had fallen from 47 floors. Tonight, she walked away on her own feet. Not erased. Not silenced. Not remembered as fragile. But recorded. Alive. And when she began walking down the steps into the Manhattan night, Ethan moved beside her, not leading, not claiming, just present. The world had watched her fall. Now it had witnessed her rise. And this time, the story belonged to her.